Good morning, guys. This morning we're going to talk through John 19. Again, this is Michael, teacher turned trucker. And if you're getting any value at all, or if you would, hit the thumbs up and share the video to help spread the devotion side channel. We will be doing some more trucking videos as I begin trucking school next week. My tentative goal is to try and do one each night when I get home, just to recap the day. But for this one, we're going to be working through verses 1 through 11. That's my tentative goal this morning. There's a lot going on. So we'll go ahead and get into it. But I want you to pay close attention to Pilate's responses and what you see with Pilate, because I think it's very telling. And I think it's going to add to the condemnation that he and the religious leaders are due. Okay? So, in verse 1, then Pilate took Jesus and had him flogged severely. The soldiers braided out a crown of thorns and put it on his head, and they clothed him in a purple robe. They came up to him again and again and said, "Hail, King of the Jews!" And they struck him repeatedly in the face. Verse 4, again Pilate went out and said to the Jewish leaders, "Look, I am bringing him out to you, so that you may know that I find no reason for an accusation against him." I'm going to stop here for just a moment. Everything so far is really self-explanatory. But notice his repetition. I think it was John 18:38. Pilate made it very clear. He did not see any fault in Jesus. Okay? Remember, the religious leaders put Jesus forth as one seeking to cause sedition. Okay? Trying to undermine the Roman authorities. That is a charge that Jesus has been accused of. That is a charge that Pilate is repeating again, that he does not see ample evidence to support the claim or support the punishment of crucifixion. Okay, verse 5. So Jesus came outside wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe. Pilate said to them, "Look, here is the man." What this is doing right here, Pilate does not believe Jesus deserves to be crucified. He's bringing Jesus out after having stated publicly that he does not believe Jesus should be crucified, that he believes Jesus is innocent. And by bringing him out in the state that he is trying to generate some compassion from the religious leaders to get them to back off this demand for crucifixion. Because he's had him flogged, he's been punished, he's been mocked, he's been ridiculed. So he's bringing this man, the man who Jesus has stood quietly and endured the punishment. A side note before we move on, if you're guilty, we tend to scream out all the more when we do something and we're being punished for it. But here we have the dichotomy of someone who is innocent and is remaining silent. So this is the model that we are looking at here. Verse 6, I believe it is. When the chief priests and their officers saw him, they shouted out, "Crucify him, crucify him." Pilate said, "You take him and crucify him. Certainly I find no reason for an accusation against him." To my counting, this is the third or fourth time that Pilate has said he sees no reason for Jesus to be crucified. Furthermore, he shifts to them and says, "If you find fault, then you crucify him yourself." Pilate knows that the religious leaders of the Jews don't have the authority to crucify him, but he is trying to wipe his hands of this whole matter. He's telling them, if you think he's guilty, then you take and punish him, because I'm not going to bear the burden of blame or on my conscience because I don't find fault in him. And this is really strange, because this is a Gentile. He is not a believer. And yet, all of a sudden, his conscience is coming into play. He does not view Jesus as worthy of death, which shows at some level Pilate has a conscience working within him. So he knows right and wrong. So take that as the counsel that it is. Even unbelievers know right and wrong. Okay? Verse 7, the Jewish leaders replied, "We have a law, and according to our law, he ought to die because he claimed to be the Son of God." Verse 7 is critical because it's in verse 7 that the true reason for the chief priests desire to have Jesus crucified is manifest. Pilate does not know about this claim. Pilate was not given this charge of blasphemy, according to the religious leaders, against Jesus as a reason for him being crucified. Remember, early we discussed the religious leaders had the right to have him put to death for religious issues. This is a religious issue. This is an issue that the religious leaders, if they truly believed, they should have had Jesus taken out and stoned. But because of the prophecy indicating that he would be crucified, they unknowingly, we can take that for what it is, have sought Pilate's authority, because for them, remember, they're afraid of the people. If they take him out and have him stoned for blasphemy, they're afraid that the people will revolt against them. Okay, because there's enough of the people that believe. Now, also, it bears to be stated, this charge of blasphemy, again, is only blasphemy if it's not true. But because through the preponderance of Scripture, through the indwelling now of the Holy Spirit, we know that this claim by Jesus is factually true. Therefore, it's not blasphemy. Therefore, the religious leaders did not have the authority or the grounds to have him put to death, whether by stoning or by crucifixion. So when Pilate receives this added charge, it has an impact on him. Verse 8, when Pilate heard what they said, he was more afraid than ever. So Pilate has repeatedly made it clear he does not find fault in Jesus. Now they've added another charge. Remember, the Greeks of the time, the Romans of the time, all these different people groups, they're very spiritual. They worship different gods, deities, lowercase g, lowercase d. So they're not true gods. But the idea was prevalent in that day that gods would come and dwell among them. So this really gets Pilate's attention, and it really shakes him. Verse 9, and he went back into the governor's residence and said to Jesus, "Where do you come from?" But Jesus gave him no answer. Pilate wants Jesus to tell him specifically, "Yes, I'm from such and such place, I am a god," or "No, I'm not." He's trying to get Jesus to tell him if he's a god or not. Okay, and yes, I am saying a god, because this is Pilate's thought process, not "Are you God?" but in Pilate's mind, "Are you a god?" And it's at this point that Jesus remains silent. This is where, as a lamb before the slaughter, the idea is because Jesus has already given Pilate enough answers to previous questions to confirm his innocence. It's no longer necessary for Jesus to provide more information to Pilate regarding these charges. Pilate has what he needs to know in order to set Jesus free. Okay. Verse 10. So Pilate said, "Do you refuse to speak to me? Don't you know I have the authority to release you and to crucify?" We see the dichotomy between man's philosophy and God in this verse also. Do you refuse to speak to me? Don't you know I have the authority to release you and to crucify you? First, we see Pilate's arrogance. We're going to see Jesus' response, but Jesus' answer is not what one might necessarily have initially expected. He's not going to battle against Pilate's pride, saying anything about Jesus' authority being superior to Pilate's in those specific words, but the end result's going to be the same. Verse 11, Jesus replied, "You have no authority over me at all, unless it was given to you from above. Therefore, the one who handed me over to you is guilty of greater sin." So this is showing God's sovereignty in this situation and over all things. Because the very power with which, or the authority with which Pilate is seeking to exercise is not even his itself. We see this commonly in the government. The President of the United States has a certain measure of power. Local governors, mayors have certain measure of power, and they dispense it and they work through other people. Those other people have a measure of authority or power that is granted them by their superior, whether it be a mayor, a governor, the president, or whatnot. So this idea is not foreign, that power is not originating within oneself, but Pilate, in his pride, is saying, yes, this is my authority. But here at the end, it also says something else. Therefore, the one who handed me over to you is guilty of greater sin. This is an interesting phrase, and I'm still mulling it over. So I'm going to put some thoughts out there maybe. Because all sin is equal. It separates you from God. But I would say that instead of it being this sin is more heinous than the other, instead it's going to be in priority. Because of this sin, these other sins have happened. So this idea of their sin is greater. It's greater in priority. They did this, which allowed these other things, which allow what you're doing now to take place. So those are some thoughts. Pardon me, I had to stop and start a few times, sneezing fits, and then my dog barking. So I don't think, in closing up, guilty of greater sin, from the first to the last, I think is what this idea is. And I think because of the idea of how it translates from Greek into English, it can get muddied a little bit. Share your thoughts with me. I'm not 100% sold on that. I do tend that way because my understanding of sin is all sin is equal in a respect, in that it's against God, and it only takes one of whatever it is to separate us from Him. So there's some room for discussion there. I am open to that, and I'm willing to hear some thoughts. Moving ahead, hopefully this next week I'll put out some more videos for the trucking side. Looking forward to doing those more. It's been more on a hold right now because I'm kind of in a holding pattern. I finished up my teaching job, and now I'm just kind of waiting, transitioning into the school for the CDL. So once that happens, I'll be putting out hopefully some more trucking videos. Again, if you like the video, if you have any value out of the video, hit the thumbs up. If you have any comments or suggestions, I'd love to interact with you guys on some of these theological points that come up throughout the videos. This one's getting long, so we'll go ahead and cut it there. So again, this is Michael, teacher turned trucker, and you guys have a great day.